James chapter 5, verse 16. Therefore, confess your sins one to another and pray for one another that you may be healed. The prayer of a righteous person has great power as it is working. The context is confession one to another comes when someone is sick. And may I suggest to you that the church is sick. The church down through the years, both through its teaching and its practice, has hurt a lot of people. It is said, it is a popular saying, that those who no longer believe in God is because they met someone who said they knew God but did not act like God. It's our fault. One of the hardest things for any institution, organization with authority to do is to apologize. I am sorry.
Sorry about that. Let's restart this again. Welcome to our third episode of our F.L.O.W Present series, I'm Sorry. Right? 3 episodes in and I mute myself while talking. Before I introduce our panelists, I want you first to make sure that you are sharing this with somebody else, liking it as well. This is going to be amazing, an amazing conclusion series, an amazing conclusion conversation. And so let me introduce first Miriam, Vondell, Pastor Juju, and our very, very special guest host, Dr. Knight is with us as well. And you know you love her because she is all things Black magic. Landy is also with us today. That's right. We're going to be concluding this conversation. So make sure you're in the chat because we want to hear from you. And you know how we like to do it. We start off with one of our many different segments, but today I wish they would. Let me just leave it there. I wish they would. And we're going to talk about apologies. I wish they would. So I'm going to start it off. I wish they would say sorry after you pass gas in a public place. Look, I understand that it's uncomfortable. I understand that it's taboo, but you're really just letting me know to prepare myself. Okay? That's all. I'm not here to judge you. We all do it, but just help me out. I don't want to walk into that. And it definitely happened this past weekend. And I was like, come on, man. You could have just said, I'm sorry. Just prep me. I wish they would. I wish they would say sorry after that, right? I see somebody in the chat choosing violence. So I'm going to jump over to Vondell. Vondell, what you wish they would?
When it comes to apologies, I wish you would apologize to me with a caveat. Like, I'm sorry, but keep it. I don't have no addendums. This is not something terms and conditions to sign. There's no fine print. Either you sorry or you're not. If there's addendums, you can have it. I don't want it.
Overstand it, man. Keep your apologies if they have an asterisk next to them. Pastor Juju, what you got? I wish they would.
I wish they would cut me off in the middle of the apology because I got like something to say. You feel me? So like, if you cut me off in the middle of the apology, like that arrests me. Okay, so I wish they cut me off in the middle of the apology. That's me.
I wish they would. My sister Miriam, what you wish they would?
I wish they would apologize to me, but not mean it and say it in such a backhanded way that it's not really an apology at all.
Sips tea. Dr. Knight, what you wish they would?
I wish they would, and this has happened several times, but I wish they would say, I don't mean to interrupt you, in the middle of a conversation and then proceed to interrupt me. You know, like I'm talking to somebody, you come up, oh, Pastor, I don't mean to interrupt you. And then you continue. I wish they would say that, you know.
And have the nerve to say, I'm sorry after that. Like you did it on purpose.
I'm sorry. Yeah, you did it on purpose.
Landy, what you wish they would?
You know, I wish somebody would apologize to me, but then turn around and tell me why I'm at fault, why they have to apologize. Has happened several times. I wish you would.
Oh man, if you are in the chat with us, what you wish they would, drop it in the chat. We'd love to put it up so we can see what you wish they would as it relates to apologies. Look, again, we gave you a bit of a buffer time. We're about to engage in this conversation. I'm going to preface it. If you haven't seen the sermon series by Dr. Knight, it's our fault. Not part 1 alone, not part 2 alone. Part 1, 2, and 3, because he brings us the entire journey and makes sure that we land in a place that we need to be at. So let's run it. All right, everyone. First of all, I got to put this up. I don't know if everyone saw this, but I wish they would apologize and make themselves the victim. I had to talk about that. That's real. So Dr. Knight, I'm going to start off with you for our conversation. I'm just going to frame it once again. For those who may not have seen the sermon series, they absolutely need to. You presented this word around the idea of it's our fault. You really explored church hurt and in many ways, for me, kind of its origins and why we are where we are, with basically an absence of young adults and youth. And at the end of it, you basically said it's our fault. But here's my question to you, and then I'm gonna go to the rest of the panels. Was the apology necessary? That's really what I want to know from you first. Was it necessary? Why did you feel like you needed to kind of present this word? And then I'm gonna go to the rest of the panels, if you could, please.
Yeah. Well, first I want to thank y'all for having me. I love this platform already. Y'all have lots of fun. I think this is significant, so keep doing it. To your question, absolutely was necessary. Somebody asked me a different version of this question, and that was, what was your motivation for doing this and why now? And I really think it was a convergence of several things, but one of them, which I reference in, I think, part 2 of the series, and then part 3, was a series of conversations I had with a very, very close friend of mine who is now an agnostic and who used to be a Seventh-day Adventist Christian. And just having conversations with him just about his view about God, his view about the church and its inactivity in the social justice movements, of a myriad of things, I thought it was time to kind of really talk about openly and start a conversation about the role that the church has played in why people view God a certain way, why they view Christianity a certain way, why they look at religion, at least Christianity, with suspicion. And I thought that it was important for us to do it openly. I do know that some critics, and there will always be critics, I'm not worried about them, but I do know that some critics have said or would say, well, it's almost like airing dirty laundry, right? Like, should we have done this in public? Maybe it needed to be somewhere else. I absolutely think that the people who we have hurt need to hear us openly talking about it. I don't think that this being done behind closed doors or in secret corners would have done any good. And so, and the response that our church has received and that I've received, emails, texts, and messages on social media from people who are not Christians, from people who used to be Christians, from people whose friend of a friend told them about it, and even atheists, has been unbelievable. And that's been, I think, just to say, hey, this absolutely needed to be done.
I appreciate you answering that question for us. And you talking about bringing it into the open space and having this conversation. We have panelists across different kind of generational lines. And so I want to hear from you guys. Do you feel that the apology was necessary? What did the apology do for you? Especially now that we have Dr. Knight here, we'd love to kind of open that conversation up. So let me start with youngest of us, and then we'll kind of bounce around. So, Vondell, was the apology necessary for you? Did it do anything for you?
I think that it was necessary, just not for me personally. I think while I am part of the audience that I think it was intended for me, like I don't put not anything against the sermon itself, but like words necessarily aren't for me. So while I think it is definitely something that was needed, especially for a lot of people, for me personally, not so much.
I appreciate you sharing that. Basically, I'm hearing from you that it was another bit of lip service, and no disrespect to the sermon, of course, but just the idea of like, I need more than an apology. And I think that's real. There may be some that connect with that. Pastor Sanders, for you, how did the apology land? Do you feel like it was necessary?
Interesting. I don't think it was necessary for me, but I think it's only because, I'm still here and I haven't necessarily been hurt by the church in a way that other individuals have. I do believe, though, that as a young pastor, okay, like you got to understand, back at Oakwood, we like worship Dr. Knight. You know what I'm saying? So like many of us were asking ourselves, man, will we ever be able to say something like this? And to see someone who we look up to do this, kind of sort of be a model as to how it can happen. I think it was necessary for young ministers like myself to see that, hey, you can indeed do this. And even when you and I were having a conversation about this, we were like, yo, it's kind of like he's starting up trouble, but it's like he's starting up good trouble, not like unnecessary trouble. This is good trouble that you want ministers to be starting, So I think it was necessary, especially for so many other ministers to see, especially up and coming ministers who look up to pastors like Dr. Wesley Knight. So.
I appreciate you answering that. Miriam, I'm coming to you next, and then Landy, and then we'll kind of move on real quick.
Yeah, I think it was not necessary for closure for me. However, it was validation. Being a woman who has, I'm an ordained elder of the SDA Church, and having conversations with local church leadership and understanding that they don't always hold themselves accountable to the hurts that they bring forth to, their church members. It was just validation of, how I've been feeling this whole time.
Mandy, what about you?
Good.
For me personally, where I am at my age with the church, the establishment of the church, I can say that it wasn't necessary for me because regardless of the position of the church or what the church does or whatever, it doesn't change how I present myself in ministry or what I do. But I do know for myself and my concern for my community, which is very much so has been affected by the same levels of church hurt that was talked about. A lot of those individuals needed to feel acknowledged, needed to feel seen, actually needed words put to what they experienced. And they've never really heard that on anybody's pulpit. Honestly, when Pastor Knight came and he was given the apology, I was like, Lord, I hope he's here next week, because you don't hear people, even though it is not necessarily his wrong for the organization, but just to take that position on his pulpit, I had a fear for him, because it's like, okay, well, let's see what this goes next week, But I think, for some people, it was necessary, and that's what I heard online. I saw people saying that it was good to hear that someone actually acknowledged the hurt and that they felt seen. I think that's the first step to re-engaging people who have walked away.
Yeah, and I want to kind of build on that, because now we're here, right? Now we're having this conversation, Dr. Knight. But I wonder what next, because I feel personally, and this is for anyone who wants to respond, I feel that we as Adventists, and I'm going to claim that right now I worship in the Adventist church, I feel like we're very good at having conversations. We're very good at lip service. And so, yes, you've acknowledged something new, but I wonder if it just won't be a hot topic for now. And by the time we get to the new year, we'll be back to our same old routines. And so really, how do we move forward? And this is for anyone who wants to just go ahead. How do we move forward?
Well, let me dig in on something, because I understand where all of the panelists are coming from in the sense that I think almost all of you said it wasn't really for you, but you understood its necessity for someone else. Here's where I would want to maybe expand our understanding of what the intention was. Okay. So it's not so much, I would probably even argue that it might actually be for more of you than you think. Because I think we think the primary audience was, or that the primary goal was to address everyone's personal pain or hurt. That's not necessarily it. That was part of it. Part of what I was trying to do is to bring an awareness and a consciousness, because what we often do comes out of certain values and the way that we think that we might not necessarily be aware of. So let me be clear. You might say, this is not for me, and it may not be for you right now, but it is a deposit spiritually for your future in ways that you will be challenged by people who look different than you, do things differently than you, believe different than you. What we don't understand is that at a certain age or generation or part of your matriculation, your journey in life, your development, certain things doesn't really affect you, right? So right now you can say, oh, this wasn't for me, but I know who it was for. But just wait till you have children. Just wait till you get older. Wait till having children or having certain experiences older on in life triggers the fears that you were raised in. This is a real conversation, because I had this conversation with people. See, I'm a Gen Xer, so I'm 46 years old, right? At 26 years old, if I had heard this, I'd be like, it's not really for me. But when I started having children, certain fears that lay dormant in me that I didn't even know I had were activated, because now I don't want my child doing certain things or experiencing certain things, right? So what happens is people who think they're progressive, and I hope y'all hear me on this, people who think they're progressive in their younger years, just wait till you get older. A lot of times we point our fingers at those who are conservative and whatever, but they're like that for a reason. And part of it is life will make you throw up your defenses. And when you throw up your defenses, that's when you start, if you're not careful, mistreating people. So Jesus. That's why I'm kind of pushing back to say, maybe more for you than you think right now. You just haven't had those experiences that maybe will trigger the importance or the profundity of what we were trying to do.
So I can. Sorry.
Personal, real quick, Landy, because Pastor Juwan, I saw you chuckle, and people don't know this. I recently had some great conversations with Pastor Juju. That's how I call him. He my homeboy. We friends. And I legit had a moment where I looked at him and said, "Yo, I really thought I was progressive, and maybe I'm not so much, right?" And it ain't but a couple years. I mean, there's a good change between me and Pastor Juju. But I want to be honest, I want to be honest about the reality of. I think I also needed it. I won't lie about it. I needed it because there were hurts that I experienced in a church that me and my sis over here attended to that ain't nobody ever apologized for. Yet my family continues to attend, and everyone acts like nothing's happening. So for me, I felt like I needed it because I felt seen. And I also recognize that like there is a lot of things coming up with me right now out of protection, because I'm like, no, we can't be having that because what's going to happen next? And I thought I was progressive, y'all. Just so I want to be real honest about that. Landy, I cut you off.
No, it's cool. I was, as you were speaking, Pastor Knight, you're right, because I'm 45. I have 3 teenage girls, and we sat as a family and we watched the entire series, right? And we did that because we knew, me and my husband knew what we experienced growing up in the West Indies. We knew, and we know what we don't want our children to experience, and we know what we don't want to project onto them either. And sometimes as parents, I have to check myself, because I'm coming from a place of, you just need to hear me and don't worry about it. You know what I mean? You need to be okay. And you know, I come from that place. And so I found that after listening to this sermon, on some instances, even though I feel I'm progressive in some ways, I had to go back to my children and I'd be like, I'm sorry, there is no book on parenting. I don't know, but I did not mean this. And I did not mean to leave you with this if I did. So you're correct, because I did have to, as a parent, now look at it differently and see where I am now coming out of the roots inside of me that had been placed through my own experience, what I was doing to my own children.
So let me push this though, for all of us here. Are we having the conversation with the right people? Right? Because I think, Dr. Knight, you have a platform that others don't. And I know that a couple, like my mother, for example, my aunts, they were all talking about this is amazing. But these are individuals that were already pursuing a type of growth that would hopefully lead them to this kind of point where we all want to be at. Then there's this whole other generation, this whole other group of people that don't care. They probably won't watch your sermon series, won't be a part of these conversations. And so those are the people that are addressed. So how do we address that? And I'm talking about to everybody here, whoever has this, like, those are the people we need to have the conversation with, but also the very people that most likely will be reticent to engage in this conversation. Anyone got any thoughts? I'm looking for solutions. I need help. We can talk about this all day, but we don't need it. Go ahead, Miriam.
I was going to say, are you asking us like how we engage these people in conversations, the people that aren't around?
Yes.
So I'll tell like a quick story about how at my former church, the one that Rob and I both attended, recently, a young person who also happens to be my cousin, she passed away from sickle cell. And for many years, like my generation, I'm a millennial, I'm 31, and I had a couple people that were on the younger side of me, a couple people on the older side of me. But that whole generation's gone, essentially, at this church. And basically at her memorial service, all of these young people came back in droves. And I'm sitting there and I'm wondering to myself, why is it that they were able to come to this? But we haven't seen them any other time. You can invite them to church. You can do all the things, and we haven't seen them. And I was talking alongside a woman I call Miss Pat or Mama Pat. And she said, Miriam, it's love. It's love that brought them here. It's the love of, her name was Pauline. It's the love of Pauline that brought them here. Nothing else. And so it started making me wonder, how can I show love? Is love the answer? Through bringing people back. So that was just a thought.
Thank you for that, Miriam. I think you hit the nail on the head. In fact, if we remember, that's where I ended in part 3. That's when we were talking about, for that first John passage, right? We love because he first loved us. And the answer is that people need to know love and feel love, and it needs to be seen. I think this might go to Vondell, what she was kind of saying before, is that, okay, we gotta, or at least implying that we gotta, move past words. I think it starts with a conversation, but the conversation then needs to then lead to conversion. That's a change of behavior, which then leads to a demonstration of that love. And so it absolutely is all about love. That's why they came. That's why they came to a funeral rather than a worship service, because they had a love connection to Pauline. And I think that we underestimate it. And to answer your question, Rob, are we talking to the right people? Absolutely, we are. One could argue, well, we don't need to hear it as much as the people who were hurt. I would argue not either or, I would say both and. That we need to hear it because we are the people who can then spread the love, show love, regardless, as I said in the series, regardless whether they come back to church or not. That's not our goal. Our goal is to just show love. And how will they ever hear it? You're right. Not all of those people are going to listen to the sermon series. Doesn't matter how many times you forward it to them, but they will listen to you if you have a loving connection to them. They will listen to you. And you don't have to repeat the words of the sermon series. You can just show love. And I think that's where it starts. So the reason we did the series was to equip the church to actually be the church and to show love. And that's how words turn into action. It's through people. It's not through the message just to equip you to be who God called you to be.
So I'm gonna be a challenger a little bit. And I'm with it. That comes with a measure of, I feel, isolation and challenge that sometimes is hard to weather. as a millennial who's kind of smack dab in the middle of this like radical change that exists, right? Gen Xers, you guys are continuing to try to like push it. Some of you are super dope, hype conscious. And then I got this Gen Z who are like, what? I mean, I grew up with everyone being who they are. And here I am trying to exist in the middle and show love. So the Gen Xers who aren't woke are saying to me like, oh, that's too much. We can't do that, right? Because that doesn't reflect the way that we were taught. And then Gen Z is saying, well, you're not changing fast enough because I grew up with the idea of you want to be transgendered? Okay. See you, sis. Period. Right? Like if you want to cut off all your hair, I got no issue with it. And so here I am trying to balance this and just speaking honestly and feel like I'm being pushed out either way because I'm trying to find this way towards love that is both new and kind of natural, but hard to maintain under these conditions, I think, of two ends that want something almost like drastically different, I feel. Does everyone understand me? Like, that's how I'm feeling in the skin that I'm in. I see you nod, Juju.
Yeah, it's an interesting divide. No matter what, I think I too have that tension because I'm very much so a young pastor, and I am a part of the system, and I'm also like a critique of the system at the same time. So of course that comes with a measure of isolation, that you sense, and I too understand, wanting certain things to progress a little bit faster in certain instances. Okay, so I get that tension there. I think what it boils down to is, and see if you all can relate to this. I think seeing where the commonalities are, seeing where we agree. I think that's something that's a how we can begin to progress. See where we agree, because I think a lot of times when you have these tensions, when you have conflicts, it's so easy for us as individuals to focus on all the reasons why we are different and focus on all the reasons why I may be right and you may be wrong. So I think if we can focus on first commonality, see where we agree, and then possibly begin to branch off from there, I think that's something that could possibly like keep us in the head in the right direction. Because no matter what, we're going to have individuals who may be older than us, who may be younger than us, and they're going to believe differently than us. Okay, but I think if we can have, let's say, empathy, openness to their perspective, openness to their viewpoint, all right, so that we can find a sense of commonality, find a sense of togetherness, I think, man, that will really make a difference. And I think last week we talked about how all of this takes humility, which are all characteristics of love. So I think that's my viewpoint on the matter. So
there are two comments I want to pull in here in the chat, and thank you everyone who is in the chat. It's definitely going off. All the comments about my hair are unnecessary. Y'all all know bald is sexy, so stop playing around. Someone commented here, if you grew up in a home that never showed love and you haven't been taught love, how can you share it with someone else? This is why we have so many broken people. They haven't healed within. What do you guys think about that comment? Because I think that reflects a good deal of certain pockets of congregations. Does anyone have any thoughts about that comment?
I think it's accurate. And one of my favorite quotes is hurt people hurt people. And I do also think it traces back to in the absence of getting love, you substitute that with wanting to be part of a collective, a part of something. So it's like, all right, I'm gonna just do whatever this is, and you doing something strange, you can't be over here because I just want to make sure that I'm part of something, and that is in an effort to fill the void that where love should be. And because that's never there, you just keep doing that because it's working. This is fine. It's not, but whatever helps you sleep at night.
I appreciate that. And here's another comment. Let's get into this. So someone said, I wonder, at Rob, if the necessary conversation to the generation you are referencing isn't about the responsibility of the collective, but the responsibility of the individual. Dr. Knight rightly expressed accountability and responsibility on behalf of the collective, but what's the responsibility of the hurt? Or millennials who appear disaffected and disconnected to the collective? Does anyone have any thoughts about this?
Right. Well, Rob, I anticipated this question. I knew in this conversation this would come up. And it's not a bad comment or question. I think it's necessary to talk about because a lot of people are asking this. So let me use, even though as I preface in the series, I'm not a therapist, but I want to use kind of the language so we can understand. When we ask a victim, a person who's been traumatized, what their responsibility is, that's terribly problematic.
I support that as a therapist.
Okay, you're a therapist, right? Okay, great, right? So I think that when we talk about it like that, because I think we start to say, well, I know the church did this to you. I know the church said this to you. I know the church mistreated you or abused you or neglected you. But what's your responsibility? And I don't think that it is our right as the perpetrators of hurt, I'm talking about collectively, to ask the person we have traumatized what their responsibility is. Now, if I'm talking to a person who is hurt or traumatized, as I have been, my close friend is, we would then talk not about their responsibility in relationship to the trauma the church gave. My conversation would be, so how are you doing? Regardless of the church. I'm not even connected to that conversation. How can you heal? How can you be the best you can be? So the responsibility more so is for self-care, but I think we need to really put a line of division between that kind of self-care and me coming alongside and being part of that healing process, rather than say, well, you did some wrong too. I think that's pretty equivalent to the young girl who was groped and you asking her, well, why'd you wear that? I mean, I don't think anybody in their right mind would ask a young lady that. Doesn't matter what she was wearing, she didn't deserve to be groped. So it doesn't matter what these people did who were in church. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what they were doing. I don't think that we should really talk about their responsibility about what happened to them. I think the church needs to own what we have done and leave it there.
Any other thoughts?
So if I'm sorry, are we raising hands? I don't know.
No, just go ahead.
Okay. Sorry. So Pastor Knight, what I'm hearing you say is not so much a responsibility in what took place on them, but now from this point forward, how do we self-care ourselves into a more healthy place? In terms of so if we're talking responsibility, how do you from this day forward move forward to make sure that you can operate from a more healthy, holistic space that does not create a detriment for you or for anyone else around? That's what I'm understanding you to say.
Yes, absolutely. And part of that, I think this is why the apology is I think necessary for people. Now, some people will say, and I've heard some people say, I don't need it, right? I do think sometimes people say that out of a place of defense, out of a coping mechanism, they've moved on. That's fine. But I do think that it's the responsibility of the person to say, hey, I'm not going to be a victim forever. I'm going to go get some therapy. I'm going to go get some help. I'm going to be part of a support group. I'm going to get into a loving community that loves me for who I am and where I am. I think that is vitally important. I get nervous. And this might not be what the Facebook person was saying, but I get nervous whenever the church starts asking victims what their responsibility is. I just get nervous. I've been in those rooms. Pastor Sanders is probably entering into some of those rooms now, but as a pastor, as a leader, we are in rooms with conversations that a lot of you are not privy to. And I'm telling you, whenever that responsibility question is raised, the conversation shifts. And now we begin to blame the victim for what the perpetrator did. And so that's why I'm very leery about those kinds of questions.
Miriam, I think you were going to say something.
No, I was just going to add to it by saying that the church's accountability is of the utmost importance. I remember sitting in a board meeting and experiencing a moment where they decided to bring up a young man who was basically having a baby out of wedlock. And the conversation was, we need to we need to do something about this. We need to figure out how we're going to either censure him, and if something doesn't happen, we're going to disfellowship him. And being the young elder I was at the moment, I pushed back and I said, how can we hold him by a standard that we never even talked about? Mm-hmm. And when I said that, someone on the board stood up, looked at me and said, don't you ever say that. The church has standards and we need to live by them. And there was silence in the room. Everybody just watched as this went on. And a part of me broke that day because I think that when we're not able to be held in a place of accountability, that, like Pastor Knight was saying, that's a scary area to be in. My husband and I, we love watching documentaries, and we especially love watching documentaries on like cults and stuff. Don't worry about us, but we just like to see like what the idea, like what's going on in people's minds that makes them go into these things and so on and so forth. And one of the characteristics of cults, and I'm not saying that the Adventist Church is a cult by any means, but this is an
open, safe space. Say what you gotta say.
Yes, but is that you cannot question the church, and you can never hold them accountable. It's always about the victim. And so, what kind of space are we going into if the church can't even acknowledge, yes, we've hurt you. Now, what can we do to go forward?
Mm-hmm. I find this to be so transformative and why we're here, because sis, you and I know we've been a part of some board meetings where I know I've been silent, where I know I haven't said things, and I got to be real honest. Again, Dr. Knight, your sermon, if I had my watching, you need to watch it because it opened me up. Like, it opened me up to the times, and I think maybe I was talking to you because where I was like, I need to apologize, or somebody else I was talking to, because I was like, dang, even in my silence, and get this is where sometimes I think this conversation is necessary, because people feel like because they haven't said anything that they're okay. Well, here's a quote: silence never helps the oppressed. It always helps the oppressor. Our choice to not say anything at all. And Dr. Knight, you were talking about you hope that we would never blame the victim for being groped. I remember F.L.O.W having a conversation about misogyny and how we were just pushing the bar a little bit, how we were trying to determine what women should wear and I think, Landy, you were part of that conversation. There we go. In order that men, and I'm speaking from the stance of a man, that we might not look at them in an inappropriate way. That's the precursor to victim blaming. I need you to change your behavior so that I can do differently. Say what? And the issue was much deeper than that. So let's be honest. This conversation, again, needs to be had and needs to really be pushed towards responsibility of the body. Now, in that, I think the user did clarify. I do think each and every one of us holds some responsibility to our own thoughts and actions, whereby, again, you may not have been a direct perpetrator. Like, I haven't personally groped any young women. I haven't personally, said that, hey, you need to not be in this space. I have been a part of board meetings where I didn't say anything. I have been a part of business meetings where I didn't say anything. Therein lies my responsibility. And I think that's the conversation, again, we need to push going forward. I see a lot of shaking heads. If someone has something else to build on that, feel free to go ahead.
I think sorry, Vondel, go ahead. Go ahead, Vondel.
I kind of recall what I wanted to say earlier. And it's just, I guess for me, why the apology didn't hit the way I think it did for other people for me is because of the collective versus the individual. I don't want an apology from the collective because the collective didn't do me anything per se, right? Like, the SDA church logo did not hop up off the Bible and start cussing me out. Like, it was a people that I knew. And for me, it's like, if the apology's not coming from them, it's not going to help me per se. And I know I'm not going to get that apology from them. So I just made my peace and called it a day. So I just feel like there is a big difference between like the collective. And it's really good to acknowledge that, okay, these person got away with doing this stuff because of the collective, because nobody said anything, because this is what was normalized and was taught. However, with that in mind, like technically the entire SDA church did not do me anything. It was this one person. And like, if that one person is going to say nothing, for me, it's like, it doesn't hit the same way.
I appreciate you sharing that, cousin. I want to look at this topic here because I'm going to say, first of all, Mr. Taylor, Jared, thank you for commenting and being open with your comments. I will also say your comment activated me. I'm going to read it so everyone can share. Pastor Juju, you want to go ahead?
Oh.
You can go first because this is actually, I wanted to add on to this, but you want to read it first, so go ahead.
Yeah. So the context of my question isn't what Dr. Knight is describing. Agreed wholeheartedly with his position. The conversation about responsibility is not necessary and is inappropriate. My question is about, as a follower of Jesus, what's my responsibility? What's the therapist's word to the victim to empower them for life after, in the context of being a follower of Christ as they relate to the collective? I'm going to share my little bit, and then Pastor Judy, please go ahead. The reason that activated me is I think the dismissing of the immediate hurt. And I think, and just maybe how I received it, and I could be wrong. What I think tends to happen as Christians is we're very much like, hey, I get you hurt. Hurry. Well, you know what? Christ has this XYZ. Christ wants you here. I get you. But right now, I want to throw hands. So while I hear you about me wanting to be a better Christian, right now, I want to throw hands. Can you be with me in the space right now where I'm ready to throw hands? And as a therapist, I feel that is the missing ear, literally the missing ear of the church, where they're not in a space to hear what is being said and be willing to act on that, like on that word. Because sometimes somebody wants to say, like, I get you. That was yo, woo, right? And maybe you say nothing else. Maybe that's because that's not the time just yet. But maybe I'm also misreading that. But that's how I receive that. Go ahead, Pastor Juju.
Yeah. So for me, I agree with the first thing that Dr. Knight said. Okay. I think in addition to that, from an aspiring therapist, this is what I would say. We got to grieve. What is our responsibility? Grieve. Like this is what we're taught in school, that as a therapist, we teach individuals how to grieve properly. And see, the thing is that our churches aren't necessarily showing individuals how to effectively grieve through processes. More than anything else, what I've from personal experience, what I've seen is that we essentially tell people to push it down, push ahead, keep trucking along. But no, I think the responsibility for each individual, if you want to become a healthier individual, holistically speaking, all right. And Jared, I hope I'm speaking to you. As a Christian, I think it's important that we learn how to grieve. There are 5 steps. They're difficult. There are times when you'll go back a couple of steps, but we must grieve, and we must learn how to grieve effectively, because the reality is that we can't move forward. We can't come to a place of acceptance, a place of resolve, if we are not grieving properly. So I think the first step, we can grieve. And as a collective, I think that churches, pastors, leaders of the church can teach people how to grieve effectively. Like, that's something that we can do. I think we owe it to people. We go through way too much hurt in life not to know how to grieve effectively. There are too many people who are holding on to things from childhood. And our churches need to be a place where people can find answers as to how to finally come to a place of resolve for stuff that happened in church and out of church. So start off by grieving.
That's good. That's really good. I would jump in and say, in addition to that, I think, and thank you for the clarification, by the way, Jared. I think that there's also this personal responsibility of emotional intelligence. I think that the way we talk about Christian spirituality actually minimizes, sometimes demonizes emotion, human emotion. So we're taught both implicitly and explicitly that the emotions that come along with trauma, abuse, neglect, abandonment, all of those things, it's not really spiritual. I mean, it's real, but it's not kind of real. It's valid, but it's not really kind of valid. And if you really love God, you wouldn't really go through doubts. You wouldn't be hurt. That's your sister. That's your brother. You got to love them. I think that's dangerous teaching, I don't think it's actually biblical. We understand we have to love everybody. We understand that. Jesus taught us that very clearly. But we also, in the Bible, understand that people go through the human, like you said, processes of grief or dealing with certain issues. And because we as a church have minimized that, most of us are not emotionally intelligent. We don't even know where we are. And so then we blow up in some meeting or something over something that has nothing to do with what we're talking about, because some of y'all therapists on here, we bring that emotional system, damaged emotional system to the meeting. And I think emotional intelligence is another personal responsibility of every believer.
Go ahead, Landy. You ready? Go ahead. Just go on. And Amir, come on after.
I have so many thoughts. I have so many thoughts right now. I think that it is important. So, like when people say, oh, the appeal can't be emotional, it has to be a mind decision for you to go ahead. You don't bring in the music. This needs to be this type. It cannot be an emotional thing. It's like as if though we are neglecting the fact that God made us emotional beings. And so how he created us to be able to feel and to be able to process through grief or, whatever that is like, ignore that, because that cannot be a part of your decision making. It makes you feel like you are being dismissed, which is why I said that even if the apology given by Pastor Knight, if you feel it wasn't for you or whatever, it was for somebody else, is because they felt acknowledged, they felt heard. The moment a person feels acknowledged and seen, then you have now created the foundation for the relationship that will allow you to build on top of that. That will eventually get you to the point of, yes, God is going to walk beside you. But before I get to the I accept and I am now on the street corners preaching and all of this, before I get to that, can you deal with what is happening right here? And don't ignore that. And I think that a lot of times we ignore it and we say, just get over it because Jesus paid it all, get over it. And I think that we need to get to the point where we actually see people in their hurt. But you know why? This is the other thought that was coming up in my mind as y'all were talking. You know why that is so difficult? Is because you have to exist in a space of vulnerability. And in our vulnerability, I can't go there. I can't go there. If we exist in a space of vulnerability, then that really exposes the deep down parts of us that a lot of other people are not willing to see as of yet, because it doesn't match what the fundamental belief said.
Landy, we can't be vulnerable. We can't be vulnerable because that would mean we're sinners.
Listen.
We're not a church of sinners. No.
Vulnerability is
open and honest space, but we're not that. We're open and honest space here at F.L.O.W, but we're definitely not that. We're not sinners.
But in vulnerability, you get the connection that is necessary to partner into community with people through life.
You can keep that. I want to be a good Adventist.
When we run from that, then how are we able to actually say that we are brothers and sisters? And how do I feel comfortable bringing anything to you? Because the minute I bring it to you, then you're now carrying it someplace else. And I'm going back on mute. Okay.
That's okay. No, because I'm just being honest. Sorry for those disclaimer. We don't necessarily ascribe to those views. We are okay with being good, stonewall, silent. I sit next to you every day. Don't really care.
You are the problem, sir.
I just want to make sure I got a place to go to after this. I want to make sure I got a place to go to after this. All right, take out tongue in cheek. Miriam, Vonald, do you guys have any comments? Because somebody said something in the chat that I thought was powerful.
I was going to say that that directly connects with the third part of Pastor Knight's series, in which he was saying that the way we connect with God is the way we connect with other people. The way we see him is the way we treat other people. So if we're not vulnerable with him, we sure as heck are not going to be vulnerable with anybody else. And I think a lot of times we make God this lofty being in the sky that answers our prayers at times and things of that nature, but we haven't made him relatable. How much more relatable can you get than someone coming and in human form, your savior coming in human form? How much more relatable can you get?
I'm going to step into my therapist bag to be really intentional, though. What Landy said, while I talk about tongue in cheek, that is the scariest thing. And here's what I think is the paradox of Christianity. It's actually what Christ did. Like Miriam, you described what Christ did. He became vulnerable. And because he became vulnerable, he gave us access to himself, and therefore we had opportunity to heal. But vulnerability is exposure. And I think and I think Juju and I, we talked about this, what is scary for us and why emotional intelligence is difficult is because we have to open ourselves to that vulnerability. That's scary though, because someone can hurt me. And we know with Christ that people hurt him. So I think there's a part of us, right, having had that experience that says, while I get you, my G, maybe we can do it a little differently because I saw what they did to you. And in fact, you tell me for a fact that they'll do it to me. That's scary though. That's really scary. And so I think we created a space where we have this pseudo vulnerability, this idea of, well, I can present just enough of my flaws, ones that are acceptable, the very surface one. Yeah, I cussed a little bit. And maybe I lied yesterday, right? But if I talk about how I was up in them sheets last night, no. That's too personal. No, thank you. If I talk about my bottle of Jack is not hidden in the back, it's on a countertop. It's a little too vulnerable. And so we can't be that church for fear, and I'm going to go to, this is part 2, I think, for fear that someone else may do the same thing. That's not okay. Juju, I saw you had your hand up, man.
I'm really happy that we're having this conversation. I'm happy that Dr. Knight said what he said about emotional intelligence. This is my view. Let me know if you all agree. I don't think that you can advance in your walk with Christ if you are not willing to learn how to be more emotionally intelligent. Like emotion is at the core, one of the cores of what makes us who we are. If you are, let's say using the theory of CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, right? The reality is that it's our thoughts and our emotions which lead to action. Okay. Like we are built as emotional human beings. And so if you're not learning how to regulate those emotions, how to manage those emotions, I don't think you can get God. There are several aspects of scripture that speak to emotional intelligence, especially when you begin to talk about vulnerability. Like scripture literally says, confess your sins one to another. Like I don't know about you all, but I've never been in a space in church for real, where people felt comfortable, where people felt vulnerable enough to confess their sins openly. However, in order for us to take our understandings of God to the next level, in order for us to even be able to do this, it takes emotional intelligence. It takes vulnerability. Like even apologizing, it takes vulnerability. Grieving takes vulnerability. Because so many of us, right? Here's another responsibility for us. Like we actually have to say, yo, I'm hurt. It's hard to admit that impacted me. Like we don't like to admit that something impacted me the way that it did, right? Probably because of pride and ego. But it all stems back to emotional intelligence. So this is my thesis. Like you can't be a great Christian. You can't be a great follower of God if you're not willing how to explore, do the personal journey of learning what emotion is all about. If you learn how to do that, I promise you, your entire understanding of God, the world, and yourself will go to the next level. So,
yeah.
If I could, I know you probably have at least one more question, but I do think that it's important as we talk about this responsibility, because I know on all of our minds, and we're even talking about it now, is what are the next steps, right? So we had the apology, we started a conversation. What do we do next? One of the things I think we need to do, and I'm literally going to quote my friend, because I think the principle is the people who we've hurt, hopefully all of us are still connected to somebody, right? I think it is our personal responsibility as church members, as disciples, to listen to them. We are taught to always teach and tell. I think we need to learn to sit and listen without giving any answers, without giving explanation. Well, this happened because of this, without giving any cliche or promises of God or quoting a text. Just listen. One of the things Remy said to me, he said, Wes, I want to thank you for asking me questions that I don't think anybody else in the church ever asked me. And I've been gone for over a decade. He said, and your willingness to ask me questions this was in preparation for the series, made me listen to all 3 sermons, and I haven't listened to a sermon in that long. He was like, he said, it's me. I actually listened to the word of God because you asked me a question and you listened. I think that's our responsibility. I think we underestimate the power of listening.
Landy, Miriam, Vondel, I'm still absorbing some stuff. You guys have any thoughts? I really am. No, wrong button. Here's something that came up to me. I'll say this. 2 things. Dr. Knight, I was studying the word, and I really do this on flow, but this is powerful. The sermon about the sower and the seeds is actually about listening and types of listeners. Just want to put that out there. Somebody needs to check that out. It's actually about listening and types of listeners. That's that. And here's something to revolutionize somebody. You actually feel your way to thinking. This is scientific. This is neurological. You're like, what? You feel your way to thinking. At the base of your brain, right, is all the things that allow you to live biologically. You feel those things. You feel hungry. You feel thirsty. You have this innate desire to breathe. If you cannot do those things, you don't think well. So think about when you're hungry, you don't think well, right? When you're thirsty, you don't think well. When there's something physiologically wrong with you, it's hard for you to cognitively be. Now, here's what's crazy. A lot of the things that impact us in the most profound ways happen at the stage where we feel the most, 0 to 3. And I'm just dropping some knowledge on y'all because I think it's profound to where we need to go in listening. And so what do you do with baby? Go ahead.
Did you say that the age that we feel the most, 0 to 3?
Is 0 to 3. Is 0 to 3.
So they do have more emotions than us?
I see what you did there. And I'm saying that because I have a newborn. I have an infant now. And we are learning by the way we hear her what she's feeling. And we become active in providing her needs because it's like, oh, wow, you feel hungry. You feel like you need to be changed, etc. That doesn't change for us as adults. We feel a lot of things. And what happens is we learn to ignore it because we don't feel heard. And because someone doesn't hear us, we ignore our feelings. And because we ignore our feelings, we can't think right. And so now we've tried to make the Bible cognitive and feel like, why is there still a disconnect? Because people are saying, well, I don't feel safe. I don't feel heard. And I think I want to put this out there. You final say, man, we done talked our way up into like, that's the easy hour, y'all. I want to put it out there to you. I don't even have a question. Just where are you now and where you want to take this? That's it. Where are you now and where do you want to take this? And if it's okay with you, Dr. Knight, we have a segment called The Connection. If you just want to wrap it up, like you take, anything between 2 to 5 minutes and just wrap it up. But for the rest of us, I'm done. Where are you now and where do you want to take this? And this being our conversation, the series, wherever, whoever feels comfortable going first, feel free. Oh, we are.
Can I? Okay. So forgive me when I say this, okay? I think a lot of times, I think we have been conditioned in our community to have something to say and not receive because we have the truth. We have salvation. We are the remnant. And so you have nothing of value for me. So that thought process has put us in a position, dare I say, of sometimes superiority in conversations because we are the only ones who can contribute valuable information to this conversation. And that has removed us from the posture of listening. And so when we begin to change the mindset that this person has something valuable for me, then we will find a way for us to assume the posture now of let me learn from you. And how can we step to the next step together? Right? Because I've learned from you, you may have learned from me or whatever, but for the most part, I'm here trying to hear you. I think it's a huge mind shift in terms of next steps. Mm-hmm. It is an incredible mind shift and posture adjustment where we begin to look at people with the intention of learning from them. Just very briefly, I was in a clubhouse room with a bunch of, Adventists, and someone came in the room, non-Adventist. They acknowledged that they were non-Adventist. And they, in this space, not having been in a church space, started to kind of pour out what they need and all that, and all that stuff. Immediately, the Adventists in the room started talking. Well, this is what, and they took the posture of come to the altar. Come to the altar. They took the posture immediately. It was like there was a shift because now there's a non-believer in the room. And so there was a shift. And so there was not a lot of listening happening with that person. Up to now, I still really don't know what that person was really asking for. We just knew what we had to give. So I think that the adjustment, the pivot, a major pivot that needs to take place is when we can posture ourselves just to listen and learn and then ask God, what do you want from me in this situation? That's what I think everyone needs to evaluate where they are and how they approach those conversations.
Thank you, Landy. Miriam or Vondo, Pastor Juju, who wants to go next?
I think for me, a lot of, especially the young people who had left my church, some of them have decided that they do not want to be a part of the Adventist church anymore. And I think for a lot of people, that literally shakes them to their core because they're like, well, what? You're leaving the remnant? You're leaving? And I think it's important that even if they have gone, if they are working on their relationship with Jesus, that's all I could ever want. We have people who have decided to become Baptist or Pentecostal or whatever. Like, I think as long as I can, still be in relationship with you, I don't care what you're doing or where you're from. I'm going to love you and I'm going to love you unconditionally. I'm going to advocate for you. I think when we forget that, that love doesn't mean we just love someone when they're doing what we want them to. That's manipulation.
Ooh, ooh, dropping them final words.
Love means loving someone through everything, anything, going into the miry clay with them and helping pull them out. That is love. And we need to first get that love from God first so that it can overflow in our hearts and give to others.
Vondo or Pastor Juju? Wow.
Repeat the question again, please, so that I make sure I answer this.
Ma'am, it wasn't that long.
Yes.
Where are you now, and what are you going to take with you?
Where am I now? I'm in my house. Okay. So, I mean, I don't think I've shifted from the stance that I was when I got here. But I always think it's interesting to hear other people's viewpoints and all that good stuff and internalize that. So my stance may shift after the fact. From here, I mean, I think for me, I'm doing what I've always done, which is be myself inside and outside of the church. And I mean, I have gone through the process of separating myself more and more from the church over the past couple of years. And this has made me kind of question whether I should go back on that or commit to that path. So I guess my stance has shifted a little bit. But this kind of showed me that, one, I always knew that, but I'm not the only person that's been hurt. And if I can help other people not be hurt, whether in just standing up for them or shielding them or making them feel heard in a way that a lot of people are not, then I should do that to the best of my ability. I was not able to do that when I was younger, but I can now because I'm an adult. So should the opportunity present itself, I should take advantage of that.
And Pastor Juju, go ahead.
Yeah, where I am right now, I think I'm in a place where I am open to seeing God in different spaces. I understand that I have been unlearning and relearning a lot of theology because not all of theology that I was taught growing up was accurate, and some of it was toxic. So what I've been doing over the past couple of years, and now more than ever, is just seeing where is God, and what other sources, what other entities can better explain aspects of God better than even Adventists can. Because I've been finding that other belief groups, even though they say it differently, even though they say it about their particular higher being, they say certain things that's true in Scripture, right? And they say it in a way that's so much more meaningful than we know how to say it. So for me, learning, relearning, so that I can constantly just be growing closer to God. And I think, where do we go from here? When it comes to learning, one of the biggest things that I've been understanding, I said it last week, and I'm going to say it a little bit more nicely now. I think we need to learn how to care for people. I think, and for a lot of us, we were taught, hey, support people in this way, support people in that way. However, I'm finding that, we need to just care more. We need to learn how to care more. And I say this specifically because, I grew up at Venice. I'm in the city. I'm back home in the city where I grew up with my church. And I can say this, my brother has been depressed, clinically depressed, and been suffering with severe social anxiety for the past 10 years. And there hasn't been more than 5 church members who have come to visit him in 10 years. Okay? For me, that says our church doesn't necessarily know how to care. They can pray for him. They can pray. But when it comes to holding people up, learning how to support people, care for people, and this is what a lot of people who have been hurt by the church need. They need individuals who can show that they care. We need to learn how to care for people so that we're not just praying for them. We're actually engaging them. We're interacting with them, and we're being more supportive. So I think that's it for me. That's it.
Thank you. Before Dr. Knight, you conclude us, just a brief announcement. Remember, producing team, I'm going to go through our slate of stuff for this weekend, just giving you guys a head up. So on Fridays at 8, we have The Word. Join us. Our Bible studies are just like our Flow Presents, honest, open, and rooted in the Word. So we encourage you guys to join us. You can go to metrosda.org/Metro Youth Young Adults to get connected to us. Then on Saturday mornings, we have some food for your soul food. Our Sabbath school service, where we also, again, have an honest, open space discussing things relevant to Christian lives. And once a month, we have our Sunday dinners. As things open up, we will be going in person. Right now, they're virtual. Bring your favorite dish, and we talk about anything. What have you been watching? What are you interested? What are your goals and your interests? We're here for that. And of course, you know that we have Flow Presents every Saturday. 3 Saturdays out the month at 4:30. Our next series, Revelations. Just going to be talking about Revelations. And so I want to personally thank Dr. Knight for being with us for this hour. I know that we could probably go longer for this conversation. If you want to continue this conversation, join this space. If you don't believe me, you can come find me. I believe about listening to people and having open spaces. Your voice matters because it's your voice. That's all I need to say. So we're going to run the connection, and Dr. Knight will wrap us up. Run it. Oh, sorry. And my producer's telling me we have outreach next Saturday in Baltimore. We'll be connecting with some youth up there who will be doing some outreach opportunities. If you want to join us, you can see it on the screen there. I will be there. I know some of my production team will be there. Our media team will be there, and maybe some other Flow members. We also have a Flow outreach in Bronx. We have our Bronx Connect. And so if you're just interested in some connections, wherever you are, reach out to us. We will make sure that you are connected to an outreach project to be a part of it. Thank you. I apologize, production team. I'm going to do better. Now we can run it.
Every revolution begins from the people and moves up to those in power. I believe this change that we want to see as it relates to It's Our Fault has to come from members of churches, has to come from parishioners, from people who visit and who are part of the local church. The reason why we're not having this discussion in the general conference or at the division or union level or even the local conference level is because it's not supposed to happen there. It's supposed to happen in places where there is real power. And it is true, Chairman Freddie Hampton said it, that where there are people, there's always going to be power. So having said that, where this goes next is our conversation needs to really turn into transformation of behavior. How does that happen? Well, we have to move from simply being people of God, which is a religious construct and language, to simply going back to being people. Literally, like to understand that we are part of a human family. And therefore, if we are part of a human family, we then, the church, can relearn what it means to be humane. I think sometimes we focus so much on the spirituality and the transcendence that we forget the immediate opportunities we have to show love to people who desperately need it now. My hope and my prayer as we make this connection tonight, based on this conversation, is this: that we will indeed relearn what it is to be a human being. If I understand that I am human, flawed and finite, imperfect, then I can love someone else who, in a different way, but in the same way, is flawed, finite, and imperfect. Until we stop only being people of God and start becoming people who love God, it's only then that we'll see a revolution from the bottom up.